Hello everyone, welcome to the Age Group Triathlon podcast. My name is Simon Olney. I'm a professional triathlon coach. In this week's episode, I'm going to be looking at how to choose a triathlon. Now, whether you are looking to take on your first triathlon, whether you're looking for the kind of course that is going to give you the best time or the best placement among others, whether you're just looking for a destination race, I'm going to help you narrow down the right race for you and look at all the different factors you need to consider. Now, the first thing you need to consider, which is probably already decided, is which distance it is that you're going to take on. But I'm just going to go over that for people who may be very new. So, if you are looking to take on your first triathlon and you are not from any kind of sporty or endurance background, I recommend you start off with either a super sprint or a sprint. Now, a super sprint, generally speaking, and all these distances are approximate, is around about a 400 metre swim, normally in a pool, followed by a 10 kilometre, 12 kilometre bike ride, and then a 2.5k run. Meanwhile, your full sprint, as it were, again, it tends to be 400 metres swim if it's held in a pool. However, if you are swimming in open water, it will be 750 metres in most cases, followed by about a 20 kilometre bike ride and a 5k run. These are really accessible and you don't need a huge training background to be able to take one on. In fact, I reckon a lot of people, as long as somebody is broadly physically capable, the younger you are, the easier it is, as well, of course, to pick these things up. A lot of people within 2 to 3 months could probably get themselves ready for their first event. However, some people come to the sport of triathlon when they are already quite accomplished marathon runners, cyclists, open water swimmers, or they may have, a background in some kind of other endurance sport, such as adventure racing or cross-country skiing. They have aerobic fitness in spades. And for them, the idea of taking on an event that will take them around about an hour to complete may not actually be that stimulating. They wouldn't need to spend that much time training for it, and they'd rather set their sights on something that's got a bit more teeth to it. So, they may be looking to take on an Olympic triathlon, which is a 1500 metre swim, followed by a 40 kilometre bike and a 10k run. A half Ironman, which is definitely quite punchy. It's definitely quite an ask for your first triathlon, but it's a 1900 metre swim, so the swim isn't much longer. But it is followed by a 90 kilometre bike ride and a half marathon at the end, 21.1 kilometre run. And then you have your Ironman, which is a 3.8 kilometre swim. It is a 180 kilometre bike and a marathon, 42.2 kilometre run at the end. I know I've coached people who've done Ironman as their first triathlon. Doesn't mean that I recommend it, but it could be that if that's the only thing that motivates you, if you're hyper fixated on the branding and the marketing and everything that comes with becoming an Ironman, sure, you could do that as your first race. But generally speaking, I recommend against it. I think that, you set yourself up for quite a pass-fail. Either you finish your race or you don't, and because you can make all sorts of mistakes during your first race. And you finish your triathlon journey quite quickly. I mean, I personally, when I started the sport, it was less popular for people to take this route. It took me 7 years to go from starting to train for triathlon, my first super sprint, to completing an Ironman. And I had a lot of fun along the way. I won some smaller races, set some big PBs, and the Ironman for me, it was, this is a nice way to round off this journey of making my way through the distances, rather than being this really fixated on the idea of completing an Ironman. But what if it's not your first race? So if it's not your first race, you'd need to look at a lot of different other factors, such as, where are your strengths? What would you maybe like to get better at? What's around you? We're going to go into those factors a little bit later. But also you have to consider the kind of time you have available and what your goals are. If you're somebody who comes from a very performance-focused background, if you want to come much more from a place of, I want to finish as high as I can up in the rankings, then you're going to need to look at the amount of time that you have to dedicate to this. Because the amount of time that it takes to excel at Ironman relative to the time training it takes to excel at a sprint distance is quite different. Don't get me wrong, both of them require, good amounts of training that you can be completing throughout a week to be competitive. If you really want to be at the forefront of sort of a sprint or an Olympic distance triathlon, you might be training more than some people training for an Ironman. But if you're just looking to set a new personal best, if you're just looking to improve relative to yourself, then the easiest way to do this is with shorter events. The longer the distance, the more training that's involved. And if you really want to be, knocking on the door of greatness at sort of Ironman and 70.3 events, you could be looking at 15 hours a week or more in training to do so. So you do need to sort of keep all this in consideration. But yeah, the first thing you need to decide is, what kind of distances that I'm looking to complete at. And that's going to immediately eliminate an awful lot of events for you. Something else to look at is the entry fee. Now, you need to decide, what kind of money realistically you want to spend on an entry. Because if you're looking to enter a sort of a smaller race, then your budget will go an awful lot further. If you're looking to enter a longer distance race, then that budget isn't, going to go nearly as far. I mean, if you sort of look at an Ironman entry these days, I think you'd be looking at £650, £700, depending on the race, depending on the tier of pricing, okay? You are looking at a lot of money. You could probably get 2 or 3 seasons of racing at shorter distances for the entry fee of a branded Ironman event. Now, if you'd love to do an Ironman, if you love the challenge of taking on that 3.8 kilometre swim, 180 kilometre bike and the marathon at the end, there are plenty of unofficial events of the same distance in most countries. And these can be half the price, a third of the price, relative to the full Ironman experience. Now, don't get me wrong. The Ironman experience, your money does go somewhere. It goes on closed roads. It goes on well-stocked aid stations. It goes on the whole travelling circus that comes with it. But there's also a lot of your entry fee goes towards the corporate side of things, the marketing. All of these areas is what you're paying for with your entry. And a lot of smaller race organisers, they don't have these overheads, so they can offer races that are cheaper. So if you are sold on the marketing of being an Ironman, then yeah, look for an official Ironman event. But if you're looking to take on an event, please do have a look at independent race organisers around you. The full Ironman distance, I think there are only kind of 4 unofficial unofficial long distance triathlon events in the UK at the moment, but half Ironman, dozens. That 70.3 distance, there are dozens. Sprint and Olympic, probably well over 100 of each are available, okay? So please do check out your local independent race organisers, those who put on an experience which is generally more athlete-centric, more affordable, friendlier, it's more low-key. I really would encourage you to look at these, even if you just consider it as a warm-up event. If you are taking on a big branded Ironman and you want to do a middle distance as a warm-up event, okay? Do look outside of the Ironman 70.3 branding. Do look at your local middle distance race, okay? Because you can have an awful lot of fun for not a lot of money. A massive factor when you're choosing a race is the location. Now, for some people, it's not so much of an issue. They are more than willing to get the credit card out. They're willing to get their wallet out if it means that they can go and visit anywhere sort of within their continent or maybe even further away for their dream race. Great, nothing wrong with that. Happy for you. But for a lot of people, they don't have unlimited funds, especially if they want their family to come with them. If they want their family to travel with them and you're looking at 4 airfares, then that is going to start to, it's really going to start to add up, and it's going to add to all of the logistics. So this does add to the kind of the affordability of it. If you want to keep things more local, if you want to look at events that are just in your country or in your state, this of course will narrow things down a little bit. And I recommend that, if you're a triathlete, if you love the sport, if you're training for a big marquee event and you got the money, why not go and do that lovely Mediterranean race that's in a dream destination? You can turn it into a family holiday and really push the boat out, have a lovely time. That would be great. But if you're looking for warm-up races, you're probably going to want to look for races that are closer to you. And yeah, this is a real factor. It could be that if you are looking to do this all on a budget, if you'd love to do a middle distance race, but you can't afford the full Ironman 70.3 experience, find yourself an independent race Find yourself a local event. If you're lucky, they might do camping on site for a nominal fee or for free. And you can really do this on a budget. If you only have to travel a short distance to the event, or you can even drive there on the morning of the race. This is a fantastic option. So do your research. Check out the the 220 Triathlon. They have a race calendar there for UK events. Findarace.com, that's one that I tend to go to. There are all sorts available. If you stick into Google, sort of find a triathlon near me, there will be different options probably for your country. The area that you live in, that will help you find these events. Something that ties in very closely to the location of the event is the logistics associated with it. So let's look at the ability of you to travel to this event. It could be that if you live near a major airport and you can hop straight on a flight that is going to take you with minimal changes to the host city or the host area of this triathlon, that becomes a really, a very appealing prospect, really. You can get public transport or a taxi or get someone to drop you off at the airport, hop on a plane, get to the other end, take public transport to your hotel, to your accommodation, and you are within a stone's throw of the race, okay? This is the dream scenario, and that actually keeps the costs down, and it makes these races a lot more appealing. On the other hand, if you are somewhere where you would have to sort of drive, sort of like 2 hours to get to the airport that's going to be able to take you to the country of your choice, which is either going to involve, call it sort of a family member driving you, or it could be a case of calling in a massive favour to get somebody to drive you there. And then to get to the sort of your destination where the race is, you've got to make sort of 2 or even 3 changes. Then this is going to have a real impact on how appealing that race is, because travelling with your bike is stressful. If you are travelling by plane, I do recommend that you get a hard case for your bike, something like a bike box alum, rather than a soft case. I mean, there's different levels of sort of wisdom ideas that people have. They go, well, if you get hard case, then the baggage handlers are more likely to just chuck it around, whereas if it's a soft case, they're more likely to take care of it. And that's making a big assumption on the baggage handlers there, who, let's be honest, they're not in the job for the love of it. So you do have to keep, this in mind, that the cost of a hard bike case. Some bike clubs, they'll have bought a bike, or triathlon clubs, they'll have bought a bike box that can be rented out or borrowed by different athletes. That's worth looking into. But yeah, anyway, it's stressful travelling with a bike, especially if the bike ends up going on the wrong plane or not leaving the airport. And every time that you make a change on your route there, this increases the chance of your bike going missing. And I have worked with athletes who have had stuff go missing on the way to their event, even if it's just one simple flight. And the less that you take, the less changes that you have. Again, sort of the airline that you choose can have an impact on this. For professional athletes who have had major issues with this as well, the simpler that something is, the less travel and changes and logistics involved, the calmer you're going to be, especially if it's for an event that you have spent months training for. If you spent 9-10 months or more training for this big event, and you are putting things in the hands of the baggage handlers and, not missing any flights, and you haven't been able to take as much time off as you'd like, so you're cutting things a little thin getting to the race, this adds an enormous amount of stress, like wild levels of stress. So, I always recommend, if you are doing a race on the Sunday, if you can, get there on the Thursday. That would be ideal, but I know not everyone has the ability to do so. But Friday is definitely a good option. Do not try to arrive at the race destination the day before the race. Way too stressful. Too much that can go wrong. So, my recommendation is to try and keep it as simple as you can with the whole travel and logistics side of thing, because it's going to make things so much easier. We also have the accommodation that we need to consider. Now, a lot of race organisers, especially Ironman, they love putting on races in beautiful parts of the world. And they are stunning. and there is no getting around that. The sort of the views you have on the bike course, swimming in mountain lakes, taking on these incredible run courses, it is eye candy. And you look at it and you go, my God, I would give so much to be there taking on this race. It is incredible. And a big race organiser like Ironman, they have an awful lot of clout. If they go to a sort of what's normally, out of skiing season, a relatively sort of small town or a large village, and they go, we love this lake near you, we'd love to put on an Ironman here, and we're willing to put 7 million into the town, not 7 million, 7 figures, 1 million or more, into the town's coffers, for different sort of projects, education, social mobility, whatever it may be, in exchange for you allowing us to put this race on and closing down the roads and all of that. They will quite often go, wow, yes, an Ironman, they can say, well, we have all these high net worth individuals that come and want to, spend money in your restaurants and in your hotels and all that. And, it can become quite an appealing prospect. As if you listened to the podcast a couple of weeks ago, it can be in some cases that certain local authorities will waive the fee of closing a road because of the amount of money that an Ironman event will bring in. But the reality is, this race is being put on in a beautiful part of the world, stunning part of the world, but somewhere that isn't very well connected, and somewhere that has, even more importantly, very limited accommodation. Now, this is a major bugbear with the Ironman World Championships in Hawaii. Kona isn't a big place. It's not set up. I mean, the whole island of Hawaii is kind of set up for tourism. But Kona itself is not a major tourism hotspot. It isn't the kind of place where you have, huge hotels with thousands of rooms. Well, I don't think there are many hotels with thousands of rooms, but thousands of rooms between them. You have a lot of people will be staying in people's homes, in bed and breakfasts, smaller hotels, and a lot of residents on the island, they rent out their home to Ironman competitors. I mean, when I lived in Wimbledon, I know a number of people who used to rent their home out to tennis players. They would disappear for 2 weeks, and they would allow these tennis players to come and to live in their house. This is the kind of arrangement that, a lot of people have. I mean, Wimbledon, it goes on for 2 weeks, so you can understand somebody wanting somewhere to feel a bit more like home than a hotel room. But getting accommodation for Kona, or a lot of these other smaller races, I know it was an issue when the 70.3 World Championships were in Finland a couple of years ago as well. They're difficult to get to, very limited accommodation. And you can quite often, unfortunately, you can book your accommodation and you get to like 4 weeks out from the event and you get a message from, the hotel or whatever you booked through, oh, your reservation has been cancelled, because the host has realised they can actually charge 4 times more for the room than they charge you, and they're just going to leave you in the lurch. You can't afford for that to happen. Again, like mortifying levels of stress. So you do need to figure these things out. If you're looking at an event somewhere like Barcelona, you know that you're gonna have, it's easily connected, well connected, lots of airports, lots of train stations, lots of hotels. It's well set up for receiving tourists, and you're gonna have a really smooth sort of experience getting to the race. Whereas if you are looking at a lot of areas that are more sort of difficult, I mean, let's face it, Europeans, well, rest of the world, looking at the current Trump administration, looking at the policies that they have, I'm not making this political, looking at the policies they have, about the wanting to, check people's social media, about people being detained with valid visas because, and it is, people who are misinterpreting the rules, people who haven't looked through things properly. These are mistakes, but you can't afford for something like that. And even looking at other countries, I know that there are sort of some Ironman events in areas such as Rwanda, which isn't renowned for being the safest part of the world to travel to. So you need to make a decision for yourself and go, look, what is it that I'm sort of willing to risk? What are all these hoops that I'll have to jump through? What are my chances of, being potentially refused entry to this country, or being detained even in some cases? These are all sort of factors that you have to consider when you're choosing a race. And it just makes the idea, for me personally at least, of taking on a local race, a lot more appealing. Something else to consider is the type of swim. So, are you looking at taking on a lake swim, a river swim, a canal swim, a sea swim, a bay swim? These are all different bodies of water that you can swim in. So let me give you a quick rundown of what you can expect from each if you are new to the sport. So, I missed one actually. Pool. Let's start with a pool swim. So if you are taking on a shorter triathlon, it may have a pool swim, especially if it is early in the season or late in the season where the water may be a bit too cold, combined with the air temperature, than to put on, an open water triathlon. These events are fantastic. They're a great entry point into the world of triathlon. They're fantastic. And my first triathlon was a pool swim. Now, with a pool swim, if you're a weak swimmer, if you're a nervous swimmer, you may be a swimmer who has no intention to ever dip your toes into a piece of open water, this is absolutely fine. You can take on a pool swim. You do have the... I guess you have the chance to have a little bit of a rest at each length. You do run the risk of being stuck behind swimmers, of course, which is frustrating. But this is all part of sort of the pool triathlon experience. Unfortunately, there's no way to make it completely fair. When we then move into and look at lake swim, so this is in a freshwater piece, area you're swimming in. Now, depending on the lake, if it is a very small sheltered lake, there is nothing better than a lake swim. It is glorious. But if you are swimming in a reservoir, it should be a lot more larger. If you're swimming somewhere that's more exposed, then this can come with its own set of challenges. Because you are likely going to encounter more in the way of chop, more in the way of waves, I say waves, not waves in the truest sense, but, as you have water that sort of will ripple across the lake, it can, especially in high winds, it can gather up quite a little bit of speed. And you can end up with, in some cases, a slightly rough lake swim, which sounds ridiculous to say. But I think some of the roughest water I've swam in was actually at 70.3 Staffordshire in the lake there. I really did feel that I could only breathe to one side and that I was sort of being knocked about a little bit, just a little bit, not much. But it was for a freshwater swim in a lake. It was surprisingly, surprisingly choppy. And it can be that certain lakes, the way they're designed, that it can just increase the risk of this. If you don't fancy a lake swim, then you could look at a river swim. Again, it depends on what races are near you, really. But a river swim is another option. Now, with a river swim, it's always going to be upstream or downstream. That's just the nature of it. If you take on a river swim, here's a little tip. The current is strongest in the middle of the river where it's deepest. And the current is weakest at the sides. So, if you are swimming downstream, you want to be swimming in the middle of the river. If you're swimming upstream, you want to be swimming to the sides. Now, of course, there's only so much you should be willing to go off of the racing line to achieve this, but it is something that I would definitely consider, and sometimes you have no choice if that's just how a course is laid out. If it's a rectangle, if it's a big wide river, don't have much of a choice. But if it is a more narrow river, then choosing where it is in the pack that you are, whereabouts in the river you swim, is an important consideration. If you are swimming in a river, then you have a slightly higher, in certain areas, risk of sewage. Unfortunately, sewage discharge. It's certain rivers in the UK, especially in recent years, we've had lots of raw sewage that has been dumped into our rivers. Again, I'm not going to get political, but I'm sure you can guess what my feelings are on it. But You really do need to sort of consider this, look into the area, if it's somewhere which has had lots of sewage discharge, because it's in the triathlons are held in the summer, and we do tend to get storms in the summer as well, big thunderstorms, and this is sort of one of the peak times quite often for sewage discharge, where the drainage system gets completely overwhelmed and it gets diverted straight into a river. So definitely something to consider. We also have canal swims. Now, canal swims are very rare. There are only a handful of events, well, big events at least, that have them. One of the downsides with a canal swim is it can get a little bit narrow, and you could find yourself swimming right up against the edges of a canal, which is often made of brick or concrete or something that is equally unforgiving to your elbows. So do have a look at this, do consider this, these factors. Looking at saltwater swims, so we have a bay swim and we have a sort of an ocean swim or a sea swim. A bay swim is in a very sheltered part of the world. So you will have, maybe in a harbour, it may be in a sheltered natural bay, but you will not have strong waves, currents and swell within that bay. You'll have a little bit, of course you will, but it is going to feel a lot tamer. Whereas if you go for a sea swim, not many races are held in parts of the world that are famously choppy, but on a bad day in the ocean, you can have, pretty significant currents. And we're not talking about rip tides that will be able to drag you out to sea. Don't worry about that. There are lots of water crew there to keep you safe. But we're talking about it being harder to swim into a current than, as opposed to if you're swimming in fresh water. Of course, you can get a bit of a push around from a current as well, but that assumes that the course is sort of a square or a rectangle. If you're going somewhere such as to do Ironman Wales in Tenby, it's a triangle, and you may not actually end up with a current pushing you back at any point. It might just be hard work. Big waves, swell, these are all issues that come with sea swimming. And I recommend that if you are entering into a sea event or you're considering entering a sea event, make sure you have some experience swimming in these conditions before you sign up. Because I don't want you to pay your money based on the location of the event. Oh yeah, perfect. That's where I want to be. That's where I'm going to do my race. And then you are kept awake for months worrying about big waves and being swept out to sea or something equally dramatic like that. Chances are, if the weather is really bad, they'll cancel the swim. There was the unfortunate incident in Ironman Cork a few years ago. I'm not going to go into that, but I think that Ironman have become more risk adverse in recent years when it comes to the swim, which can be very frustrating for athletes, but also, let's face it, is athletes' safety at the end of the day. So those are broadly the different kinds of swims that you need to worry about. Something else that's really important to consider is the temperature. Now, broadly speaking, again, check the rules for where you are in the world. Around about 24, 25 degrees, sometimes it's a bit higher, check with the individual race organiser, wetsuits become banned. And this means you will not be able to wear your big neoprene safety net, which is a serious consideration. I'm not here to throw shade. I'm not here to, sort of to make fun of people who don't like swimming without a wetsuit, because, well, I'm one of them. I'm 55 kilos and I really do struggle, with the cold, and I tend to sink quite quickly. So for me, non-wetsuit swimming isn't really ideal. But if you are looking at this, the temperature of the race, that can give you an idea of the chances of the swim being cancelled. So if the average water temperature is listed on the Ironman website, if you're looking at Ironman events, you will be able to find the average water temperature for that time of year. If it's about 22, 23, this should be setting off alarm bells, like this could be a non-wetsuit swim. If you're a strong swimmer, if you hate swimming in a wetsuit, that's fine, go fill your boots. But I want to avoid people who train in a wetsuit all year round. They do most of their swimming in the pool with a pool boy. Don't do that, just for the record. Do most of that, but because they're thinking, I'm going to swim in a wetsuit, it's going to be fine, I just need to spin my arms. And then they get to the race and they go, wetsuits are banned. And they go, I'm not getting in. I can't face it. Or they swim breaststroke, they have a panic attack. There's all sorts of things that can go wrong. So when you are booking events, please do your research and find out what the chances are of the race being wetsuit legal. If you have any questions, email the race organiser. If it's a small race organiser, then they will most likely get back to you. Something else you can look at is photos of the event, photos of the previous year's event. And sort of years before that, ideally, because, just one edition of the race probably isn't enough to go on. You are looking, if you are really worried about it being a non-wetsuit swim, if the temperature is around about 20 degrees Celsius, that's normally, it would take a real swing to bump up to 24 one year. It's not impossible, but it would be very unlikely. But if you are, if you really are genuinely terrified of the idea of swimming without a wetsuit, a temperature of 17, 18, it's still perfectly nice to swim in, and the chance of wetsuits being banned, it's not going to happen. I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's not going to happen. What's probably more impactful than the swim, though, is going to be the bike route. And this is really what sets a triathlon apart. If you're looking at different triathlons and you're looking at different bike routes, is it going to be a pan-flat race somewhere like the Netherlands, or the Midwest in the US? Or is it going to be somewhere like Nice or Wales, where it's going to be relentless mountains and hills? Okay, these are all big factors to consider. So when we are looking to enter a race, look at the bike course, and what you're looking for is the total elevation. Now, if you're not familiar with the idea of sort of total elevation, because this is something that, before I started in triathlon, I wasn't super aware of. If you imagine taking a 10-meter long pole and standing with it pointing into the sky, if you were to ride up a hill that was that high, that would give you 10 meters of elevation gain. So when we are looking at a triathlon, if we are, it's quite hard to say what average is because it depends on the race. If we look at an Ironman event, so over 180 kilometers, I'd say that a flat Ironman event is anything with under 1,000 meters of climbing on it. Sort of that 800, 700, I'd say that's, that's pretty flat. Now, there are courses which are even flatter than that, it has to be said. Depends on what part of the world you're in. But I would say if you're looking at something that is overly flat, almost like too flat, then having to spend 180 kilometers locked into that aero position doesn't sound super fun to me. It doesn't. So, having some small hills can break things up. But by the time you start looking at courses that have 2,000 or 2,500 meters of elevation in them, this is pretty serious. Okay, you really do need to wake up and go, oh, wow, this is a really serious challenge. Now, this challenge, taking on this sort of really hilly course, it is going to depend somewhat on the kind of elevation that you have. So if we look at a race like Wales or Leeds, which lots of rolling punchy hills, and we compare that to an event such as Nice, which is like a major mountain ascent followed by, some smaller ascents. These are two very different ways of achieving that elevation. If you are a stronger, punchier rider, you are probably going to roll over those steeper hills easier. If you are a lightweight climber like myself, then the mountains of Nice will be your friend. So there's more than just total elevation that you need to take into consideration here. But also, things such as road surface. If you go and do Ironman Switzerland, chances are the roads are going to be really nice over there. If you go to, like I mentioned, they've started doing an Ironman event in Rwanda. I don't know a lot about the country, but I would wager that the roads over there, they're probably not up to Switzerland's standard. So, again, like different parts of the world, I imagine that in Leeds, the roads aren't in particularly great shape either. Lots of different parts of the world, lots of different things you have to consider. And really sort of keep in mind, what the bike course looks like. Try and see if you can find videos online of people riding around the bike route. See if you can get GPX files of the bike route so you can have a look. Where the hills are, how steep they are. Try and learn about the race. because this is really what's going to determine, how fast it is that you're going to be going. Sort of the flatter event is, generally speaking, the faster. But if it's a really windy day, there's lots of headwinds and crosswinds, maybe a gently rolling course that's very sheltered might actually be faster. If you're racing somewhere like the UK with lots of hedgerows along the road, then it's going to be much more protected from the wind than if you were cycling through somewhere more exposed. As well as I haven't really covered the run here, because run courses, they don't tend to vary in enormous amounts. Some of them are hillier than others, and if there is quite a bit of elevation in the run, then you are going to feel that in your legs. But generally speaking, you can walk up any steep hills, and it doesn't have as large an effect on your race as the difference between a lake swim and a sea swim, or a mountainous bike course versus a flat bike course. We need to have a look at the weather. We need to see what the weather has been historically, because if you are somebody who is very good in the heat, if you really enjoy sunning yourself, you're one of these people, it can never be hot enough for me, I love it, then going for somewhere, a race in southern Europe in the summer, it may be really good for you, because you will be able to race much better in that heat than some other people, and really enjoy yourself in those conditions. Whereas if you are somebody who is maybe a little bit more sort of Celtic in their background, you may not thrive as well in the sun, and you may want to be looking for a race somewhere that is going to be more likely to be overcast. It's going to be a little bit cooler. Again, if they're irregular sort of rain, like somewhere like I'm in Wales, there are some people I think who are still drying out from the edition in 2017. It can be horrifically wet, horrifically windy at some events. These are all things that you need to take into consideration. What is the climate like? Is it going to be humid? Is it going to be dry heat? How is it that I can go about this? How does my body cope with these different temperatures? And the easiest way to control the temperature is to race at different times of the year. So we need to take into consideration the time of year that this race is at. If we are taking on our first triathlon, I recommend against going for an early season triathlon. The reason for this is that triathlons start in each country broadly just about as soon as the open water becomes bearable to swim in. And if you are taking on your first triathlon and you've only done like one or like even no practice swims in open water, you're not going to have a good time. You need to have as much time to prepare as realistically you can get ahead of your first event. Now, I did my first open water swim, 300 meters in open water after only having done one practice open water swim. Because of the time of the year, it was an early season race, and I was excited to start racing triathlon. Done my first super sprint in April in a pool. I was ready to step up into open water in May. Did one practice swim in my Zone 3 wetsuit. Got in, and it took me, I think, like 10 minutes, 12 minutes to swim 300 meters. It was an absolute disaster. Okay, I had a terrible time. And you want to avoid this if you can by going for, even if it's going for an event in June as opposed to May. Again, I'm talking about the UK season here, really. Obviously, that's going to change depending on where you are in the world. If I have somebody comes to me who wants to take on their first event in May, I always get a bit nervous, because if they don't take well to open water swimming, then we could be in for a very interesting time. And that's going to be hanging over them during their entire training, this big unknown of, well, what's going to happen when I step into the open water? If you do a race in the summer, then it's during the school holidays quite often, so that can have an impact on all sorts of things such as accommodation, travel, cost, how busy certain things can be. But it's definitely an option. You're also going to have in the summer the highest water temperatures, the highest air temperatures. And there is something that's just special about doing a triathlon, in high summer in the UK, where, let's face it, over here, there's only so hot the summers normally get. It's very rare that the temperatures push above 30 degrees for a sustained period. So it's absolutely, lovely to do a triathlon in the summer, but equally, as we get towards the end of the season into autumn, the the water, open water, generally tends to hold its temperature relatively well as the air temperature cools, and you can actually get in late season races get to the point where the water temperature is higher than the air temperature, which is fine when you're in the water, but when you get out and run to transition and you're steaming, it gets a little bit nippy. So when we are looking at the time of year, this does need to be a consideration. And again, if you are very nervous about the idea of open water swimming, giving yourself several months to get better and more sort of accustomed to calmer in open water, super important. So doing a race a bit later in the year may be a better idea for you. Something else to consider if you're taking on an early season race such as Lanzarote, okay, which generally happens in May, you're going to need to start training for that, depending on a number of factors such as your starting fitness. Probably like September, October, you're going to have to kick yourself into like Ironman training mode to get yourself ready for this event. Whereas if you were, and that means sort of training through winter, basically. Whereas if you were to take on a late season event, if you go for something like Ironman Wales in September, you can probably start your training around about this time of year, sort of February, March time, or even Barcelona, Portugal, some slightly later season races. I know that over in other parts of the world where the triathlon season goes into November, sometimes even December, that can push that even further. And the more time that you can spend training in the sunshine and the warmth, I think, we all like that, really, don't we? Something else to look at is the reviews of previous iterations of the event. Head on to racecheck.com, I believe, and you can see reviews of races there. And this is a fantastic way to be able to learn more about the event. It really is, because you can sort of see lots of people who will either be going, oh, it's fantastic, really well run, really enjoying it, it's great, or you could see a lot of people going, it's just not worth it. It was really poorly organised. There wasn't enough racking in transition. The signage was poor on the bike course. And if people have genuine, negative feedback, there's some people who just love a moan, and you have to keep that into consideration. Some people will find a chance to complain about anything, but if there are people who are a number of people pointing out that there is a genuine issue with the race, then that might end up giving you sort of pause for thought, second thoughts. And you can also ask people online, people who might be in a triathlon club that that you're a member of. Do keep this in consideration. And don't rush into anything, if you don't really know. Now, big events like Ironman, generally speaking, they're very good at putting on events. But some of the local race organisers, again, I encourage you to go and do these events for the most part. But, there are some people who are organising events for the wrong reason, for whom it's more of a cash grab than anything. So do your research and don't end up giving money to events that are, sort of a bit dubious. Actually, something else to consider is that sometimes you may see a negative review for a race that could be sent by an upset resident who was really bothered they got stuck behind cyclists for 20 seconds one Sunday morning. So do keep that into consideration as well. Looking into sort of international racing now, are you looking at racing somewhere where there is going to be a real culture shock? Now, it may be really appealing for you to go and to race somewhere in, say, sort of the Middle East, Africa, Asia, somewhere like that. You could look at all the imagery and the marketing, go, oh, that looks beautiful, incredible part of the world. But ask yourself, is going there going to sort of cause, a level of uncertainty? Is it going to, whether it is sort of the culture, the religious side of things. I can imagine that, for some women, going to race in the Middle East could be slightly contentious if they have sort of restrictions in some cases. Again, some areas of the Middle East are far more progressive than others. But do just make sure that, you're not signing up for a race somewhere where, it could be that Ironman have, or any race organiser have managed to make arrangements that will help protect people against, certain sort of laws and customs during the race because of part of it. But that doesn't mean that in the days leading up to the race that you wouldn't potentially find yourself, unable to go out for a run on your own or something like that. These are things that you do have to consider. It's very unlikely that would be the case, but, it's worth checking these things. You also have probably a very big one, as well as sort of the language barrier, is nutrition. Now, nutrition, I'm talking about what it is that's available sort of in the restaurants, in the cafes, in the supermarkets. If you are going somewhere such as Asia, then it can be very difficult for people to find something that is familiar to them. And I'm going to have to break it to you, if you go and do a race in, say, China, you aren't going to have the kind of food that we get in a Western Chinese takeaway on every corner. The food is really quite different from what I understand. I've not been myself, but I know that my sort of grandparents went on a trip to China as part of a tour group, and a lot of them couldn't find anything that they could eat because they all, I guess, thought it would be sweet and sour chicken and rice when it wasn't. And I think that I remember saying that a group of them, they found a McDonald's and all started gorging themselves there on familiar food. Now, I'm not saying, I think they maybe not the most open-minded people, but this is something you do need to consider. Am I going to go do a race in a part of the world where it might be difficult to get what I recognise as being bread, or having just sort of the kind of staple foods that I'm accustomed to? Am I going to have to go? Am I going to have like the run up to this huge event? Is it going to be difficult for me to find something to eat? And there's always the risk when you are in a in a foreign country of the diet just not agreeing with you, whether it could be it's something you've not eaten before and it's something that goes straight through you, whether you do get yourself a bit of food poisoning, perhaps, from food that hasn't been prepared, washed that sort of quickly, that properly, then these are all risks that you take when you travel areas like this. Now, Ironman, broadly speaking, the events that they put on, in the immediate vicinity of the race village, it does become a bit of a bubble of Western society. People know that there are going to be lots of, predominantly English-speaking, wealthy people looking for a certain type of food and diet and that. And that can be helpful. But if you are staying a mile or further away from sort of the race village, you could find yourself living somewhere staying somewhere, that's really quite unsafe. When I went to the 70.3 World Championships in South Africa, I remember being told, yes, down the road there's a lovely bar to go to, but if you do want to go there or go for a meal out after dark, make sure you get a taxi. But it's like 300 meters away. I can see it from here. I can make out the name of the restaurant from here. Yes, but you need to make sure you get a taxi. I wouldn't want you to get mugged. And if sort of some of the local population do realise there are going to be sort of wealthy, naive people in the area who may have some expensive gear on them, then that is gonna you are going to be putting yourself at risk. You are going to be painting a target on yourself, especially if you're walking around with a rucksack with the Ironman logo on it. Okay, I can't resist. Story time. When I was in Port Elizabeth for the 70.3 World Championships, I was looking at the map of Port Elizabeth and, things to do out there. Now, for those of you who don't know, I am partial to enjoying nature, especially a bit of bird watching. It's something that I do, it's a nice contrast to the world of endurance sport, rather than worrying about high performance and, all of that constantly, to be able to switch off, go for a walk in nature, enjoy the birds, lovely way to spend a bit of spare time. So, travelled out to South Africa, excited to see all these exotic birds, took my binoculars with me. And I was looking at the map and there was a big nature reserve. And I thought, fantastic. I know some of you who've been to South Africa are already screaming at me going, Simon, what were you thinking? Big nature reserve, big park. So I go and I walk along, this main road, and like some people shouting things at me from their cars as I walk along this main road and going, okay, I don't know what their problem is. Um, get to this nature reserve, start walking through it, sort of bump into like a few people, but I'm really absorbed by, the birds. I'm there. I've got sort of an Ironman rucksack on. I've got my binoculars around my neck, and I'm walking around enjoying the birds. Sorts of fantastic birds. I've even, got a book to identify South African birds with. And I am in my element. I'm loving it. And I'm walking along, I come across like this work party. And I do a little bit of work in the world of conservation. I sort of, oh, hi, hey guys, you're right. And it's, a group of, it's South Africa. They're predominantly, if not exclusively, sort of black, native South Africans. And they go, what are you doing? I go, oh, I'm just going for a walk, enjoying the birds. On your own? Well, yeah. Are you nuts? So there are people around here who they see those binoculars, they see that rucksack you've got, and they'll take them from you and everything that you have on you. Okay. He said, somebody was doing what you did last week, got their head caved in with a hammer. Okay, right, okay, well, I said, oh, I should, I said, but when I looked at the leaflet, it recommended this area for bird watching. Yes, but you have to hire someone to walk around with you for protection when you are coming to visit this park. Oh, okay, all right. So they offered to escort me out of the park, and I took them up on the offer. Now, I was already on my way back to the race village. However, when they dropped me off, when they took me to the main entrance and exit, it's safe to say that they dropped me off on the wrong side of the tracks. It was a very sort of quite a rundown part of Port Elizabeth. Now, the area around the race village, again, quite westernised. But I was in an area that clearly, you could tell was a lot less sort of economically developed, shall we say. So I'm walking along, and, in these situations, I lived in London. I thought, look, what I need to do is to get back to the race village that was at the sea, is I need to head down the coast. I need to get to a larger road, walk along a larger road where there are going to be people nearby, other people, and just kind of walk, make a very kind of concerted line for the race village. Walk fast, look annoyed. So, I started to make my way down towards the sea, and I come walking down this street, and I can see that there are a large group of, young lads who are there, and I go, and they're sort of clearly sort of hanging around, as it were. And I'm thinking, shit, all right. If I cross the road, they're going to acknowledge that this white boy has seen them and is crossing the road to get round them and is trying to avoid them. And they'll probably there's a good chance they'll cross the road and see me as being someone who's intimidated by them. I can't really afford that. What I'm going to do instead is I'm going to continue walking, and I'm just going to go walk through them as a group. I'm going to acknowledge them, make eye contact, smile. I acknowledge them as humans rather than just staring at the floor, because that will catch their attention. And you just sort of walk along with purpose, holding my head up high. So I'm walking through this group. I've put my binoculars away by this point. Walking through this group, and and as I'm walking through them, this one lad, he goes and he steps in front of me to stop me, and I go, oh my God. And he puts his hand out for me to shake his hand. I thought, well, I can't not shake his hand. So I go, you're right. Smiled at him, took his hand, gave him a confident handshake. Not a little weak, wet lettuce handshake. Good sort of confident handshake. How you doing? And he goes, hey, you want to buy some drugs? You want to smoke with us? It's like, oh, sorry guys, I'm doing the race. I can't be smoking. I've got to get back. Oh, okay. And sort of smiled at me, and I was a little bit unsure as to whether they were going to let me go or not. But they did, and I continued and just kind of continued walking. I didn't break into a run or anything. Just continued walking away. And these are the kind of, again, South Africa is South Africa. It's the kind of thing that you can avoid if you book a race somewhere that is more of a known quantity, a known element to you. I'm not trying to make out that there are certain places that are really dangerous or too dangerous for you to visit. I'm not trying to scare you away. I'm just trying to say, you need to make sure that you are heading somewhere where you're going to feel comfortable. Somewhere where you know that you're going to fit in. You're going to have access to food that you like. There are going to be enough people around you that speak the language, and that to make your race day experience smoother, because you have enough to worry about with the athletic element of the event, without having to turn getting there, staying there, and everything into a absolute logistical and cultural minefield. And yes, thank you, Poppy, for joining in and sharing your thoughts with us. Something else to consider on the day is nutrition, the nutrition that's available on the course. And this is a massively underestimated aspect, especially of longer distance races. If it's an Olympic distance, it's no big deal. If it's a 70.3, it's nice to have access to nutrition on the race course. But over an Ironman distance, if you're looking at two races, one of which has, let's say, Morton gels, one of which has Science in Sport, and you hate Morton gels, then going for the event that has the Science in Sport gels, it could be a very wise move, because you don't have to worry about carting around your own nutrition. If the nutrition that's available on course, is to your taste, is to your liking. Again, it's just something to consider. You will need to try different brands of gels and do your research to find out what nutrition is available on course. Unfortunately, this information isn't always readily available. Sometimes you have to contact the race organizer. Sometimes it's not confirmed until a few weeks before, which is very stressful. Ironman had a questionable relationship with a company called Enovit back around sort of 2017 to 2019, something like that. And the reason it was a bit kind of questionable is the wrong word, but you couldn't get them in the UK. You had to import the products from Italy and pay all of the associated charges for that to be able to try the nutrition that would be available on race day. And I, as many others did, sort of breathed a sigh of relief when they swapped to Morton, because it's just a lot more readily available, easier to practice with. So that, again, it's something to consider, something to, just keep into consideration. Really. If you want your race day experience to be as smooth as possible, then going to a race that has nutrition that you're comfortable with and that you like available is really important. But also not just the brand, also the flavour is something else to consider, because they will hopefully list the flavours, what's available. If you go, I love Science in Sport apple gels, but I can't stand lemon and lime, and they're giving out lemon and lime on the day, then again, that's an issue. You know what? I thought this podcast would take about 30 minutes, and it's taking me an hour. Just goes to show that I, went off on a couple of tangents there a little bit. Hope it's been useful. Those are the major considerations to be made surrounding an event, choosing an event. If you are looking to win an event, you want to be able to pick an event which is going to work to your strengths. If you are a light athlete like me, go for a mountainous event. If you are looking to take on, something that's flatter and you're just a stronger cyclist, that is going to be able to help you. If you are more sort of a punchy rouleur rider, then maybe going for a hill that's a course that's slightly more rolling could play into your strengths. If you're looking to go as fast as possible, then going for a lake swim, a flat bike course and a relatively flat run is probably the way to go. And also in cooler conditions, if you are looking to go under 10 hours on an Ironman, or you want to go sub 5 or sub 4 even over a 70.3, if you have a performance goal based on time, then going somewhere that's a bit flatter and at a time of year that's a bit cooler is a good idea. If you're just going there for the vibes, for the fun, you know what? Pick whatever event it is that you want. There's no real right or wrong answers, but when I'm working with athletes who I'm coaching and we are sort of trying to choose races, trying to decide which race it is that we want to enter, there are a lot of factors to consider. And sometimes you can sit down with an athlete and you can look at all of the, like if they say they want to do an Ironman branded event, you can look through all the Ironman branded events in the region of North America or Europe or anything like that, and you can't find a single one that matches all the criteria, and you have to make some compromises. Yeah, that's just it. There is no perfect race out there, but I want to stop you from choosing something that is completely inappropriate. Hope you found that useful. I'm going to wish you the very best with the rest of your training over the coming week. I hope that you have yourself a really productive week of training, and I'll see you all next Tuesday morning.